to Psychotech.
Psychotech Live! Woo! Hello.
Yeah, I like that this is our intro.
We have the best intro ever.
Yeah, it's very us.
Oh my gosh. So yeah, I had an interesting Psychotech.
Me.
Not meant to. Never mind. I had an interesting conversation with someone yesterday who was having vaccine symptoms. So they had the vaccine, and then ever since then, they've just been having strange body effects. So tension, weird rashes, sort of anxiety about the whole thing, and I saw them. They're a friend of mine on Facebook. I saw them relatively upset about it, and I said, "Hey, why don't I take a look and see what we can do?" And so I sat with them and tried to get a handle on what symptoms we were finding and sort of what's going on with that body. Why is it so activated? Why is it so up? It was a fascinating conversation about just noticing what was going on in the body and then trying to get it to calm down and seeing what happens when we did. And yeah, turns out that if you give someone a vaccine, they have an immune storm, which is, we activate the immune system. And I guess for some people, they get more long-term effects. I think they had the vaccine a few months ago. And those effects sort of stay in the body and can keep ricocheting around for a while longer. Some people just get over it the next day, but some people seem to have these long-term effects. Yeah. Not that you want to get COVID either, because there's a long COVID effect there too.
Yeah, this is more like talking about like the experience of having vaccine versus making decisions on whether or not to get it. Yeah.
Right. So, well, my job as the person who offered to help is to sort of see what's come up and then see if we can work through it. And this goes for the same would happen if someone had had a car accident a month ago and they were still finding the tension in their body. If someone was the victim of some sort of crime and was still finding fear in their experience and flashbacks, I would still, I show up at the meeting and I say, okay, what's going on? And let's see if we can process it and see if we can get to the other side of it. This is the and particularly, we have this habit of being in our minds, being very mental creatures. And so to have the body underneath the mind doing something like having a trauma flashback to an accident, it's very confusing for the thinking being who is the conscious mind, because the thinking being is clearly like, I'm fine, I can just think I'm walking over here now. But the body seems to still be doing some sort of repeating of the experience.
Interesting.
Yeah. So there's sort of there's things you can do as a psychotechnology, as a practitioner, to sort of very kindly say to the thinking being, well, let's just guide your body through what it's going through, and then try and get it to try and get the body to do what it's trying to do. So there's a method called trauma release exercise. And this is specifically about the way the body shakes after a traumatic experience. And obviously in our society, we don't do that because we think it's kind of weird. But animals do it, or lots of animals, after they've had a big adrenaline dump, they get safe, and then they lay down and they shake and they shudder and they let out the rest of the adrenaline. But what we do humans is we just sort of go on with our day, and like we're a little bit shaken up or a little bit agitated, and we never actually let it go. So a series of exercises that are trauma release exercise deliberately get your body to the tired shaking phenomena, and as a method to release the shakiness and release the tension, which is fascinating.
Yeah, it's reminding me of like aftercare, and like after you're doing a thing that could be possibly traumatic, like kink or psychotechnology
Mm.
or therapy or whatever, right? Or like a intense sports activity of like having the person after they go through that, because they're, yeah, you get that adrenaline shot and you're just in that space, and then having that transition into regular life where you kind of just sit with them and hug them maybe, or just be quiet or let them talk, or
Mm.
just like kind of like comforting, and then that brings it kind of back down to baseline,
Hmm.
and then afterwards they've, yeah, it seems like it's a lot like, yeah, like it's, they're able to release that energy and they're able to refit back into society.
Yeah, I had this the other day. My partner had a very long conversation with a very talkative person, and was willing to step back and let the person be talkative. And then after it was like, I need to talk this out a bit. I need to like blah 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 to organize. This is one of my big theories is that minds are self-organizing, and they will be self-organizing if you give them a little bit of space to do that. And that means after a traumatic event, after an intense event, even in the like, what should I do today? Well, all I need to do is wait a bit, and that self-organizing will start to happen, and I'll be like, oh, I feel like doing this, and I feel like doing that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think kids are very much like that. Like that's like attachment styles when it comes to kids. I find my kid, he's only 4 months, but um, he sometimes just wants to talk to me
Hmm.
and release, like he's just got these things that he needs to tell me, and we have a conversation and we
Is he
laugh.
talking, or he's gabbling?
Well,
Babbling.
he's babbling, yeah. I think the technical term is, yeah, but I think it's babbling, yeah.
Right, and he
And
just wants to babble at you and like do the talking thing.
yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah. It's very weird because I don't understand anything he's saying, obviously. But I don't know, maybe I don't know if it's like connection, or like he does have things that he wants to say, and like this is his way of saying it, because he does go through that emotional spectrum,
Hmm.
and we laugh and cry, and then he calms down and eats something and goes to sleep.
Hmm.
um
That's so interesting because it almost proposes that we have a relational brain, even at his age of 4 months, that he is
yeah,
even without the language, he is trying to do something relational. Like,
yeah,
even though we don't really develop that relational brain until we have it, the idea that other minds are totally sentient and in other people at like 5 years old.
um
But maybe we have it a little bit, obviously.
no, he's got a little bit, like he did have, like when he was born, like he wasn't really aware of what's going on in general, and then he started getting aware of things, and then there was like, I noticed exactly when it happened, when he switched from just like trying to do things to like noticing that he's being seen,
Mm.
because he started getting the blushing thing.
Oh, ha.
So he'd do like the looking and then be like not blushing, but like kind of that embarrassed, like the embarrassed laughing, right?
That's so interesting because what that brings to mind is the biblical story of Adam and Eve, where um, they eat the apple and then they have shame and then they cover their bodies because God is suddenly watching them or something like that.
Yeah.
Before that moment, they didn't really have shame or the perception of other. And I have this theory that the biblical story sort of lines up to our growth story as well, that our growth in our experience, that it deliberately sort of mimics bits of our growth and experience, so that
Yeah.
and pattern match to our experience easier.
Yeah, I believe that. Like in that story, they took the fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Which colloquially is an apple, but in Judaism, it's definitely not an apple.
Right.
It's one of a bunch of things, but it's not an apple.
Right.
My favorite is wheat. Like it's like that idea. I guess like that idea of agriculture. Like they used to live in paradise, which was just hunter-gatherer thing, and then somebody learned how to cultivate wheat, and then the whole civilization.
We learned how to cultivate us.
Yeah, and it's like that.
Referring back to I think episode 9 there with the wheat cultivating us.
Yeah. I remember.
But for everyone listening to like know which one. Because anyway, yeah. So the plants that cultivated us. Interestingly, the knowledge of good and evil is also a stage in psychological development as a small child, when we saw yes, no, good, bad. Very polarizing, but
yeah, like that might be a thing now. Like he might have knowledge of good and evil on some level. Like he might have some choice that he could choose to hurt other people or not.
It's interesting because I think there's two types of good and evil. One is the sort of what I like and what I dislike. Like I like for him, I like certain tastes and I dislike certain tastes. Being he's 4 months old, but then so there's like a good and evil quality of liking certain things and disliking certain things. But then there's the more global or universal sense.
That's not good and evil. I think that's more preferences.
Right. But you can do the thing that like you can make the decision that everything I like is good and everything I don't like is bad. Which is sort of a mistake to make, depending on.
That's backwards development. Yeah.
What we usually mean by good and evil is more like a universalizing sense of what is good for the universe or bad for the universe, or good for us in the universe or bad for us in the universe. Which sort of like the concept of good and evil is like a big, broad reaching as opposed to a personal good and evil. So when we ask, does he have evil yet? It probably depends on if he gets the universe in some sense.
I'm going to disagree with you.
Ooh.
I think there is this universal, and I think we do tend to try to universalize morality to make it like consistent and remove the bias, which I definitely like. Like I'm all for that. But I think you can definitely have a rudimentary morality before that. Right? Because even just, let's say, him and me, like he could do something that I wouldn't like on purpose, and then that would be evil. Like that would be bad.
Well, maybe it will happen in near time when he gets angry and does something to spite you because he is angry or something like that, without really getting the full extent of his behavior. Like that's possible.
Yeah, but there's so
angry and threw something at you without really.
He could do that. I'd like to zoom in even more and tell me if you can just stop me if it's boring. But he's not. I don't think he's really at that stage yet where he can, like when he has emotions, he just has emotions. Like he doesn't do things, or like he'll do things, but there's just the emotion happening.
Right.
But this is like, I think there are times where it does seem that he has choice and awareness of others at this point. And so him just having that awareness and that choice, I think kind of already produces the space for things like shame and embarrassment to exist. He doesn't feel a lot of shame, I don't think, because whatever, he's still a baby, right? And nobody's shaming him. So there's not that, but just that capacity.
Yeah, so I get this impression of at one stage having emotions, but they're so big and loud that they flood. And so you literally can't pick up, as a baby, can't pick up other things while you're too busy being angry or too busy crying. You can't even pick something up, and like, because there's just too much. And then shortly after, you can have the emotion and also have the capacity to like pick up an object or like wipe your face or cry and then run away. But that's it's a later capacity to be able to do both at once or have both at once happening.
Mm-hmm.
But the early capacity is just the emotion is completely overwhelming and you're just in the emotion.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah. So yeah, like definitely, I think is like when he's in the emotional state, he's just having emotions. I don't think he's got that meta awareness yet that he is having an emotion. And then, but when he's calm, I think he is like, he does seem like he makes somewhat choices.
That makes sense. The sort of like agency comes back when there isn't some other urgent thing. Like, for example, if you can't breathe, that's the only thing on your mind.
Yeah. And at the beginning, everything was the only thing on his mind.
Right.
And now it seems like it's like more complicated than that.
Mm-hmm.
More complex.
Yep. Makes sense. There's an interesting phenomena. I'm part of the integral community, and there's a global integral community, and I have a local integral community, so in my city, and most of the people in that community haven't had kids, and they've done other things and they've contributed to the world in other ways, but they haven't had their own children, and they have asked or voiced that there's a different epistemic experience in the world when you have had kids.
Yeah.
So Daniel's in the place right now where he has the baby, and he's having the baby-like experience, and forever now he will see the world as if from the perspective of a parent preparing the world for his child for the world, in a way that someone who hasn't had a child isn't having the same epistemic experience of the world. You could almost make a bold claim of like, who is the purer philosopher? On the one hand, the person who has no child can philosophize clearly without this extra
without the burden of having to worry about future generations.
Right. On the other hand, the better philosopher, the one who has had a child, who models humanity deeper because they've had a child.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting. Since if you're gonna rope me into a bunch of baby talk, I'm gonna rope you into like self-awareness of baby talk.
Yeah. So I've actually been thinking about this for a while. I think one of the biggest things for me that changed is the timing. So before I was a dad, I was like a philosopher, let's say, and and it's very universal principles and very personal, like in my life. Now there's, for me, a lot of the salience, like a lot of that universal salience has gone into the next shorter period of time.
Because your kid's so young, particularly, or?
Yeah, because there's me, it's like my job is to get him, like there's going to be, like, let's say the next decade is going to be him up until 10, which is, one sort of mindset. And then this isn't actually the right direction. I don't know. I feel like it's I'm pretty similar, like my views. It's just what's important to me, or what am I looking at, or what do I care about? And so like the big one is the time scales. Is before this, I cared about sort of civilizations across time. And now I think a lot more about, okay, like when I'm talking community, it's like what should the ideal community be to last the next 2,000 years, essentially. is what I've been thinking about, because I don't really think I can think beyond that. And now there's a lot of thinking of like practical, how do I get him a community for the next 20 years?
Yep.
Yeah. And so like the EA stuff, it's interesting because the EA stuff is very much that across time situation. Where I'm thinking it's the kind of like EA, let's say maybe like the integrals, whatever, the rationalist, like it's very, what is epistemically correct, and then epistemics are for all time, somewhat, and but now like the community stuff is just like looking at it, I'm like, well, this isn't going to happen in the next 20 years. I need to like do this. I need to actually do the thing for my kid. Like it's very much moves from the theoretical to the practical a lot.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And ideally for people in both camps would be to have both people who haven't had kids and people who have had kids to be in both the theoretical and the practical all the time at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, because I'm going to have hopefully grandkids. So where you're going to want that, and they're going to have like descendants and descendants. So you're going to want the thing that goes across time, for sure. But and you're also going to want the thing that's shorter. That when I didn't have any kids, there was a lot more space happening, a lot more exploration and possibility space. And now I'm much more coming back to my roots and being like, okay, who's actually doing this community thing? And let's just build a community with them. Even if it's not this ideal game B meta modern thing, it's like, okay, like we'll just do the things I can and then pass that off to them.
Interesting.
Yeah.
There's also
his problem.
so one thing in my mind is the way that this also divides across politics, because as we said in episode 3, I think, integral politics, on the left, we've got a lot more collective care. On the right, we've got individual virtue. And then on the right, we've also got traditional values of having families. And so there's sort of different ways of people on the left and on the right have kids, and people on the left and on the right don't have kids. And we've somehow had different ways of coming to the same conclusions. People on the left have to be thinking about the short term of their family, and people on the right need to be as well. And then people on the left need to be thinking about long term and the universal. And so do the people on the right.
Yeah, and I really do think a lot of this is different parenting strategies or ways of approaching it, which is very interesting.
Okay, what do you mean? Can you say more? Like, what do you mean by parenting strategies?
Yeah, so there's a big one, like kind of recently-ish, in the States, where the unions are trying to sort of take over and decide what they should be teaching the kids versus should the parents have input into what the kids, and obviously I think at the end of the day it's going to be some sort of combination of the two, but there's on the conservative side, let's say, there's very much a lot of autonomy. The conservatives want to have a lot of control over what their kids are exposed to and what they're taught and all that kind of stuff. And on the more Democrat side, it's the teachers are the experts, so let them do their job situation. And when I wasn't a parent, like I had opinions on it and I had like thought about it a certain way. And then once I became a parent, I'm like, oh, I would be like, I felt like my regular sort of how I felt just come out. And then I thought about, I'm like, wait a second, I'm a parent now. What would I do about my kid?
Like my own kid, not just educating the children in
Yeah,
general.
it's not like how should a society be, it's how should my kid be. And I'm pleased to say it's almost exactly the same. Just I
Right.
have more sympathy I have a lot more empathy for the other side.
I guess it would also be possible for it to be very different. Suddenly you realize that you may have spent all this time believing that collective education should be done a certain way, and then suddenly, upon being so frustrated with the system and then having your own kid, you realize, oh no, I'm the only one who knows how to educate this kid well, and you may switch sides.
Well, yeah, so I did believe that I'm the one that's responsible for the kids' upbringing, and I still believe that. And I don't want to do it on I can't do it on myself. Like I don't know everything, unfortunately. Right. Even though I tried.
Right, so there's something important here of something like a need to trust society, because as you said, you can't do it all yourself, and so you need to be able to, at least maybe some of the time or on some of the topics, be able to outsource to society. You can't grow all your own food and make your own car and do all of the other things yourself. You get to pick some of those things and trade other people specializing in those roles in society.
Yeah, that's true. Like I believe that philosophically before, and I believe that philosophically now, and also practically. To me, it's not like I probably will teach them a lot of stuff up until I run out of knowledge, but it's not really about the teaching. It's about the outsourcing. It's who's doing the outsourcing. So for example, like I could create a curriculum where I hire a bunch of tutors and experts in their field, right? So like, let's say he's going to learn math at a certain point, right? So I don't really know calculus and I don't really want to learn it. So I'm going to find somebody that does calculus. And this is like this is my classic plan, is to find all the master students and in whatever field that they need to learn and just hire them, because they come actually pretty cheap and they know what they're talking about.
Right.
How, if that's going to work out or not is a whole thing, but that would be, then what I would be doing is I wouldn't necessarily be teaching him much, but I would be constructing his education. And so I would be the one outsourcing. So I'd be finding all the sources to outsource. Versus a school is I think about more as a school. You send it to the school and the school outsources, right? Because like the school, let's say it's the principal or the board or whatever, whoever's in charge of the school, they don't know how to teach all the subjects. They hire people to do that. And so I think really for parental education, it's a lot of it comes down. I think most of it is just who are you getting to teach your kids, and like what instructions are you giving them, or restrictions or container. And I don't really trust the school system. I don't trust the school system.
Right. So interestingly, there's one layer here of you need to somehow outsource something to society. And then also there's another layer here of you need to educate your child as to the right and wrong ways to outsource to society.
Yeah.
Which is a huge and bigger puzzle. Because there's a real do as I say, not as I do, sort of like you have to go to school, which many parents will tell their kids, even though I don't think it's good.
Right. So I'm not doing that because I'm not doing this bullshit, do this thing, even though I think it's bad. Like, no, you should be doing this or you should not be doing this. Or realistically, this is the best thing that I could do for you. And that's like, I think a lot of parenting comes down to that, like just real life, like being real here. There's probably an ideal solution to this that I don't know. But I don't know it, and he's he's aging 1 second every second. So I need to sort of plan out how that's going to play out.
So I have an interesting question here. Between when I went through a school system and now, the world changed very drastically. The internet technologies changed the way that literally our everyday looks different, because we get up and look at a phone in a way that 50 years ago we did not. And so the way I was educated was already out of date by the time I got to the end of school. And the same will probably apply to the current generation going through school and this generation who isn't yet in school, like you are planning for. So my question for you is, what are the skills of tomorrow? Like, what is he going to need 10 years from now, 20 years from now, that obviously it makes it difficult to teach him if we don't even know what they are. But what are your thoughts on what are the skills?
You're asking me very questions that are very close to like,
as in, if you're gonna put him through one type of schooling or another, or insist he gets educated in one way or another, like, for example, would you teach your child computer programming? Maybe that's really valuable.
Yeah, I'm somewhat learning it now, in the hopes that I'll have an idea of it, because I really think that, like, you kind of need to know programming nowadays. Great. You don't need to know now, you will in 20 years.
Well, maybe not. Maybe the way that AI will interface with us, or machine learning will interface with us.
That's another thing. It's like learning AI and machine learning. That's stuff. Like, luckily I don't have to worry about that yet. He's way too young for that.
Right.
But like,
so big question. Like, what are the skills of tomorrow?
Basics.
What are the skills of tomorrow?
Yeah, I think for me, it's the hard sciences, like the STEM stuff, is not necessarily university level, but potentially university level, right? Like, I think everyone should at least have a good high school education in that. And really also a little bit of university. I would like it to go into STEM. I think that's probably a better life. And then that's, like, I guess would be like the sciences, philosophy, but like, if he's going to learn that with me. And psychology. Sorry?
I realize your shirt says dad. Philosophy.
Yeah, because I do like, just like, everything is just philosophy for me. So that one I'm pretty good at. And then the psychology and psychotechnology.
Yeah, I'm interested in what I'm not sure the answer to this question of how would I teach psychotechnologies to someone who is still growing up, knowing, of course, that currently teenagers or early teens are getting a mental health paradigm that I didn't get when I was going through school. There's so much more awareness and wisdom about it that they're getting it there. But the next step will be that the psychotechnologies will be coming to those people, as well as the mental health paradigm. So how would we even teach younger and younger people psychotechnologies?
So, I mean, the thing about having a kid is that he lives with you, right? So he currently lives in our home. So, like, I'm constantly doing these kind of psychotechnologies with myself and with my wife. And so we just do that with him as well. Like, this is how we live. This is how we process things. This is what's going on. There's a little bit of, like, my wife is obviously much more experienced than he is. So there is a somewhat of a back to basics situation, but I don't see why that wouldn't just translate, right? Because you're building in the norm and the background, like the water in which he swims in, the house in which he lives in, and then this is just what we do all the time.
See, I have an opinion that everyone should have a physical practice, an emotional practice, and a cognitive practice. And they can change over time and be different things, but everyone should at least have those in their lives.
Yeah, so we were talking about the sports and stuff, like we would like to get to do sports or martial arts or something like that. I'm a fan of martial arts, actually, as a young. I did it a little bit when I was younger. And it's good. It teaches you how to use your body. And
that's interesting. When I was mid-high school, I had a friend of mine who had done martial arts in primary school, and I had not. And I asked him at the time if he learned anything or if he got great wisdom out of the martial arts. And he said no. Because I was trying to sort of gauge whether they were useful or not.
Yeah.
And even at the time of a late high schooler sort of said no. I should go ask him again now and see what he says.
Yeah. There is something like it's like, oh no, there's nothing there. And then you see people that haven't had that.
Mm.
And then you go, oh, there is something there. It's just not what you thought it was. Because like at the time they're teaching you the moves and all these things, and you're picking up the frameworks. And at the time I didn't know I was learning frameworks. I thought I was just learning moves. And oh yeah, like, oh, and you have to have like this stance, and it has to be like dude, that's so annoying, just let me punch how I want. And then they're like, they show you, well, okay, like here it is, like this is proper stance, and I'm going to push you, and then your stance, and I'm going to push you. And so they do that pushing. So there's no, like, you don't, the thing I like in martial arts is like very like it's all over the place, but there's a certain amount of this that there's no expert, like you don't need an expert or authority, right? They don't tell you that, like you're kicking the board and it breaks or it doesn't break, you hurt your foot or you don't hurt your foot, like right. You can feel that.
There's like a pedal to the metal. The real world will show you if you can effectively kick this board or not.
Yeah, and the experts aren't believe me because I'm the teacher, right? They'll show you the move first, like that's how they teach, so you can see if they can do it or not. And then you know you're doing your stance, and then they straighten your back, and you can feel when they do it right. Like obviously, like not probably some places are better than others, but they'll put like the hand against the back, and then you can feel is your back straight. Like there's no, believe me, this is reality. And I'm not saying that there's not, like I have seen some, obviously like some fake stuff and whatever, and there's, but like there is, like I think that is the thing about martial arts that is, or sports in general, really, that is quite amazing.
I would add that we're sort of, when we're little kids, we're just little monkeys. We need to run around and play and do stuff like that. That is super important for our health, to do the moving around thing. Yeah, that's for sure true as well. Like burn off that energy. Even if it's not organized in a specific martial art way, we just need to run around and muck around. And it's good to get into fights. I know this is like controversial. Ooh, yes, controversial opinion today. Daniel, but as kids, you should be getting into fights because you need to know how fighting works. Like when you get older, like if I'm like I can't get into a fight today, right? Like that wouldn't go down well. Like I haven't been in a fight since like high school, really, and because it gets costly, but I'm not really afraid of fights. I'm like a lot of people, I think they have this like panic that shows up because they don't know how fighting works. So there's a thing that kind of touches on it or like triggers that schema or something. They get like weird because they don't know what's going on. But I know fighting, so like I can look at someone and usually and then I can see like, okay, is this person actually gonna fight? Is it like they stancing? Like what kind of, like their quick movements? What are they doing? Are they aggressive? Because I know what aggression looks like because I've been on both sides of that. And most people that know how to fight can beat me out for sure. But it's most people that know how to fight better than me don't want to fight me. Because there's a certain discipline, like there's certain discipline, there's certain attitude that you have to learn how to fight, and you don't want to get into fights. But like I can feel that, and I can feel when the aggression is going, and when I need to back off, and who I can do what to more. I think I would say that it seems like there's this pattern here of this coming out that humanity is built on such a gruesome history of killing everything else.
Yeah.
We these days we kind of ignore the fact that we are horrific, really. But what we probably need is a healthy environment for us to go through that stage of development of fighting in a safe way, like in a gym, and then get past it, like get to a responsible, reasonable, rational adult who doesn't decide to fight on a whim anymore. Well, instead of suppressing it, like we just decide not to, which I think that some of the instances of people you describe, gonna bring in a psychotechnology here. So there's an idea called the 4 Fs, which are fight, flight, freeze, and fawn.
Fornicate.
Well, and yeah, so you get what the fight one is. The flight one is to run away. The freeze is to just stay still, and the fawn is to it's anything from make nice to leaning into like sexuality for, and this applies to animals as well as to and so
that's sympathetic sympathetic nervous.
Right. So this is a those 4 avenues of response are strategic action in response to threat. And I suspect that, like you said, some people go weird when they're confronted with a fight thing, they go weird. And I wonder, so if we look at it through this lens, right? So they hit with the like, something's up, someone wants to fight you. And they've chosen, they're not going to do the fight one because they don't know how to fight, because they never learned. They're not sure about the flight one because they're a bit confused, but they've probably chosen the freeze and fawn. They're like,
yeah,
right.
Yeah, this is a really good point. Like I've seen this a lot, where people, where like a hint of fight comes up, and then this is I gotta phrase this correctly, but where there's I have seen this in people where they wind up being in abusive relationships, because and one of the patterns that is going on is the person will be aggressive. It's usually female and male, so it's the male will be aggressive in some way, and then the female will move into a fawn response, and then they wind up dating people that are like aggressive to women they just met, which are not the kind of people you want to be dating.
Right. So interestingly, the 4 Fs.
Right, versus being comfortable, like certain level of being comfortable with fighting. Number one, you don't get stuck in situations, like people can't just show aggression and now they win. They have to, back it up. Like there has to be something there, first off, and second off, even when people often, like, people show aggression, and then if you're willing to counter fight that, they'll often just not, like, or you can walk away or whatever. But like even just having that, like when I was an adult, someone tried to fight me over a girl, which was crazy. And a girl I hadn't talked to in like 6 months, also, like, I had nothing to do with her anymore. And just, by virtue of me fighting back, nothing happened. Like, he just was like this, and then I go like this, and then he goes like this, and I go, and just like this, like back and forth of like posturing. And then eventually he's just, I'm just like, okay, like, do we still have to do this? And then he's just like, okay, I'm done. Like, whatever, some safe phasing thing, and then they leave. It's just that willingness to okay, if you're gonna fight me, then I'm gonna fight. And whether I'm gonna win or lose, just having to think about what my moves are gonna be, or how I'm going to fight them, sucks away a ton of energy from them. And it puts them in and like, it just makes it often not worth it. So like having that choice is important, because then you don't panic. You're in a place of power, and a place of decision-making abilities. Yeah, I think the fighting is also good for girls, like boys and girls. Like, it's not a gender thing.
Well, there is a difficulty that from teenagerdom onwards, the male body has more muscle on it for most people.
Yeah, but you shouldn't be, it shouldn't matter, right? Like you're gonna lose. I'm not saying they're gonna win.
So interestingly,
but
that's the physical dimension, right? The physical body. But there's the emotional dimension. And there's a broad theory that women develop a better and more complex emotional dimension than men because they need this alternative advantage. They need to sense if someone's about to, if a masculine is about to fight a feminine, the feminine has developed emotionally to sense that coming so that they can run before, because otherwise they're gonna be at a disadvantage in that arena.
And in general, like in civilized society, is how you should be dealing with the problems, right? Even masculine, right? Like I don't fight people,
right?
Even if they want to fight me, like I don't fight them.
Yes.
Because like why? Like that's not how civilized people work, right?
Well, back in been leaning into Alexander Hamilton, who died in a duel. Alexander Hamilton was one of the founding fathers of the United States. He helped to bring the states together. Anyway, he died in a duel, as in he got shot, as in someone had proposed, let's take this outside and shoot each other, and he died.
Yeah, if you're getting into fights, like unless that's your job, you're doing life, and you're not a kid, like kids, whatever, but like you're doing your job wrong, like you're doing life wrong, like unless you're in one of those. There's a lot of caveats, but if you're in like a westernized country, you shouldn't be getting into fights, like at least physical ones. Like it's very, very easy to avoid, and everything is biased. All the power dynamics are biased for the victim, which is like another whole thing we can get into. But if there's a fight, like if somebody punches me in the face, like I could just call the cops on them, and now they're going to go to jail. Like that's the shape. That is huge. Right. As soon as someone hits me, I have a huge amount of power over them.
Yeah. So interestingly, we've done this. We've set up a system in our society where the downside, and I think that this has changed recently, where 50 years ago people did get into punch-ups and you just kind of walked away, whereas now any person punching any other person can have the police called on them for assault. And so like there are YouTube videos of women attacking men and then men just calling the cops on them, because that's the right thing to do. Like you shouldn't be painting them back. In our society today, right?
Yeah.
So we've set this bar where the fight is, the civil response to fight is so much more threatening that it should discourage the fight, right? Yeah.
If you can respond calmly in the situation. If none of that matters, if you're panicking.
Right. So I'm interested in, as society develops, right? We've sort of got the platform of physical settled, and we've started to move into emotional self-awareness and the need to settle the emotional territory and do a similar thing to the emotional territory, where we maintain everyone in society in healthy emotional states by some other mechanism. And that'll be interesting. That'll be coming soon.
This is interesting. This is the stuff I think that like our circles are working on.
Because we're just in the same way that it is just obvious that you call the police when someone punches you in a civilized.
Well, even me, like I'm not even at that point. Like people, like I'm already not getting into fights. That's such
right.
Like I've never called the police on someone for assault.
Right, but in the same way as you would do that for a physical phenomena, there will in the future, I imagine, be a similar civil response to an emotional phenomena. I'll just call the emotional ambulance. We don't quite have an emotional ambulance.
Interesting. Is this, do you think, what like when they think of, okay, let's talk about this.
Yeah.
This is interesting to me.
Well, and this is sort of my hunch that having sorted out in the Western world most of our physical threat, we've now
you keep saying that. I just want to acknowledge that there are places in Western civilization where physical violence is the norm, and obviously like those have their own social norms and things like that, that the things we're saying don't necessarily port over.
Right. So there's like, there are gyms, there are fighting environments, there are sports, there are physically engaged.
Yeah, that's all contained, and usually I think those places tend to do a good job. Like at least all the places I've been.
Everywhere can develop its weird culture. Just like educational institutions can develop weird cliques and whatever, so can gyms. But yes, they I would like to think they tend to do a good job. But in the same way that we are getting done with our physical phenomena, we've started complaining a lot more. I don't know if you've noticed, the world is very complaining at the moment. We have the legitimacy crisis and the.
I think that's connected. I think that's people not getting into fights properly. Because when you get punched, if you've been punched in the face, like
you know what matters.
Things don't matter as much. Like, oh, someone said a word that offended me. Like that person has never been in a fight.
Right, because it should be like, oh, at least they haven't punched me in the face. That's fine. You can say dumb shit.
No, it's not that. I don't think that. It's just that my scale, like we were talking about before, like you're having these intense experiences and then you have the calming down, and that, like my scale for arousal is such that.
Oh, interesting.
It just like. Right.
So you're proposing that there is a.
Unless there's like politics, like once politics starts to get in there, that's a whole another phenomenon.
Politicians occasionally have a punch up in parliaments.
Sorry, I didn't mean like I didn't necessarily mean like specifically like government politics, but if you're having groups of people and this person says a thing and then has your face, that then you lose face, and then there's this other thing that shows up, and like you're playing like the game of people.
Social politics.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, or also real, like also political politics are gonna have that as well.
Governmental politics, yeah.
Sure.
Okay, so you're proposing that there's something of a.
My wife wants to say something.
You shouldn't have suggested that I watch your live stream.
Oh yes, comment.
Another thing that I think is a part of that equation is that back when violence was more sanctioned, many people may not have been in a position where they felt that they could safely complain. Like,
right.
If this was 100 years ago and I was dissatisfied with something that Daniel was doing, I might think twice before letting anybody know about it, because he might beat me up and totally get away with it.
That smiling face, do you really think this smiling face would beat you up?
Not that to be super clear, Daniel is not physically abusive. I don't think he's the type of person who's would be physically abusive were it okay, culturally or whatever. He's not.
But you might not have known that had you not had the safety to explore that.
100 years ago.
100 years ago. Yeah.
Right. Or, or who knows? Like, I mean, maybe he would have been a different person if it was 100 years ago and violence was sanctioned or something. No, still not.
I'd
still not beating your wife and kids kind of guy.
Dude, no, you should never have to. If you're beating your wife and kids, like you're just bad at stuff.
I agree with that, but I just wanted to put that in there because I think that that's really an important.
You're unskilled at life.
Well, there's something here of balance of power, where in order to complain about something, you need at least some power to voice your complaint and some expectation that your complaint will get addressed, which is, you have to have some confidence that something will happen. Where if you have no power and you don't believe you have the power, then you're not going to complain, because your survival strategy is more concerned with not complaining so that you don't die.
Right. Right. So I think it's like it's a really good sign that we live in a society where people are complaining about things that we find relatively minor, because it indicates that they have some sense that the benefits might outweigh the risks, or the risks may not be existential.
Right. Well, the other thing is that having cleaned up our physical safety problems, in at least to the extent that we have already in society, we're now working on the other problems, the things that we are now complaining about, where we might have complained about physical violence in the past. We are now complaining about discomfort and displeasure, and trying to move our experience into a place that is more permanently having less discomfort and less displeasure, which is
Right.
great.
Right. So we're no longer having conversations about whether slavery is ethical. We've pretty much all, I mean, people do still
That one's
engage in
out.
slavery, but it's not legal and nobody thinks it's right. You know, we've moved on,
Mhm.
which is good.
And so we've opened the door to newer types of discomfort that we can try and address.
Yeah.
Although I am still thinking about what Daniel said, that the threat of physical violence really puts things into perspective. You really enjoy a cup of tea more when this is your only cup of tea that you've had in 10 years because you've been too busy fighting the neighbors in a world war.
I don't know if I entirely agree with that. Like, yes and no. Like, sorry.
Yeah, but at what cost?
What?
Like, you know, if you're like in a war zone and then you finally get a cup of tea, like maybe that feels great. But
Maybe, but I think that maybe the experience of trauma and chronic trauma gets in the way of being able to enjoy anything.
yeah, I agree with
That's a
that.
good point. Yeah.
So
Yeah,
devil's advocate.
I agree. I actually very much agree with that, and I think that strengthens the case for kids to be fighting.
Like to have a healthy outlet,
Yeah, like in a healthy
non-traumatic outlet, hopefully.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you're doing some like judo or whatever, that's different than, you know, street fights with knives.
Yeah. I'm not advocating for like gang stuff where you're like trying to hurt the other person, but within the controlled setting, or even like in between class or something where like stuff spills out, like that's sort of that gray zone, I think.
I think that there's a lot of variation there. Like, I think that there are a lot of kids who are, you know, like things are really, really awful at home, right? And they have no idea how to manage their emotions. And that's not for play.
Yeah.
That's for real.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a very different experience than maybe the experience that you had of like sort of.
Yeah, but I also had that experience of kids having trauma and them releasing it in that way, in that fighting. And one of the things that I want to say is before that fighting teaches you is escalation. So like we used to fight all the time in high school, but there were rules. And if somebody broke the rules, that was like a real fight. And that was like a thing that was
Socially enforced rules of how you're allowed to escalate.
Yeah. And like sometimes people would have, like usually we'd agree on the rules beforehand, and then, but if you're like sort of with
You were a real rebel, weren't you, in high school?
Oh man, I loved it. We had Fight Club. It was the
school.
best. We had Fight Club. I used to go there all the time. Oh my god, it was so much fun. But we had rules. Like there was the mats, and if you were on the mats, you were in Fight Club, and if you weren't on the mats, you weren't in Fight Club.
Okay.
And Fight Club had the rules, and then you know sometimes with the friends, you know, you'd have your own sets of rules.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
This is not a world that I was in. I think my last high school fight was year 9 in high school. There was one point someone bumped into me on the street, and sort of, it wasn't a fight, but it was a confrontation. And that was the last time I had fights.
Oh.
So it's been a while for me to engage in fights as well.
Yeah, it was so much fun.
Yeah. But I had I've said this before about kids and trauma, and when I was in early primary school, like the first few years of primary school, I didn't quite realize this, but all the other kids in primary school were really strange. Like they were slightly incomprehensible to me, and I didn't understand why they were acting in the ways they were acting. But what had actually happened is they had absorbed their personalities from their environment, from their parents. And then we had all of these like parental age complex personalities that were just shoved into tiny bodies and sent to school with everyone and sent to mix.
Yeah.
So like the adults just made sense to me. They were just normal and fine. And then the kids were like illegible. I was like, what the heck are these people? Why are they so weird? Why do they act like this? And they made all these rules of like, people are weird in these ways and people are odd in those ways and don't trust them in these ways. And all that had happened is that they had copycat of their parents' personality, and just so whatever was going on at home, whatever non-perfect parental situations they were in, school was just a melting pot of having that hang out together.
Yeah.
Like the adults were fine. I always got on with the adults, but the kids really messed me up because I just didn't understand them. And I don't know how universal that is. Yeah. I mean, that was like the type of confusion I had in primary school was, why is everyone else so weird?
Huh. I thought people were weird, but I also thought adults were weird. But then I wound up thinking I was the weird one. Now that I'm older and I see those adults, I'm like, no, those are weird people.
There are still a subset of weird adults. In fact, everyone is weird in their own way. I hope you have finally noticed that everyone is weird.
Yeah. But like,
as a kid, I was trying to work out who is the weird ones and who is the normal ones.
No, the normal ones are just the people that convince you that they're normal.
Yeah, well, they're not weird enough. They're weird in ways that are secretive or something. Yes.
Yeah, and I think that's like getting back to the fighting. I'm really like in on this. Is like because people do come from homes that have, let's say, coercion or abuse or things like that, and they need to play out the patterns in order to sort of understand what's going on. And so when you're having like in fighting, like in like fighting or in the schools and stuff, you're always going, you're at some point, if you do it enough, you're always going to be, at some point, you're going to be stronger and you're going to be weaker and you're going to be equal to the other person.
Right.
Or let's say unknown. And that's...
There's a couple others, like the fight ended before we worked it out.
Sorry?
There's others, like the fight has ended before we've worked out who is stronger or weaker.
Yeah. There's a lot of different variants.
But that's also a variant that can happen in someone's home life, that something can start and break without who's stronger or weaker.
Yeah, and it's really important that you realize that you are weaker to somebody else and you are stronger than somebody else, and this is going to be true for your whole life, pretty much. With like some rare exceptions. This is going to be true your whole life, and realizing that when you have like when you have like good norms, then you're able to translate that across. So like I know, like I played with my niece and nephew recently, and we're wrestling, and I know what hurts and what doesn't hurt, so I can have that like fighting experience with him without him getting hurt. And also with my baby, like I can like play with him. We're not really wrestling yet, but also like it gives me the perspective, like sometimes people are in power and they do the things and those things are wrong and you shouldn't be doing them. And you know that because you're also sometimes in power and you have that power over people. And you don't have to swallow their lies, because people in power that are abusing it always have justifications for their powers. And it's bad to be abused by power, and it's worse to believe the justifications. And when you're in a position of power, you know that abusing is wrong. And that keeps you sane when you're being abused, and at least you won't be gaslit and abused.
Yep. It's interesting that there's talking about like a hierarchy that is built out of physicality makes sense. Like there is, like you said, there's pretty much only one order of someone is stronger and someone is weaker. You can sort of be close and maybe it can switch around a little bit, but there is only one order.
That's also not exactly true, because there is like
there's other dimensions, like there's speed and so someone can be faster, but someone can be stronger.
Let's say it evens out into fighting ability, but even so, like there was people that like I would fight if they would make a mistake, I would win. If they didn't make a mistake, I wouldn't win. So like they could beat me, but they couldn't get cocky about it. And so even though I recognize, I'm like, hey, you're stronger than me, and if we fight, it's going to cost you something.
It's funny. This reminds me of playing chess as well, where there's a degree in skill in chess where I could win if someone made a mistake.
Yeah.
And slightly above that, neither player is really making a mistake, and so you end up in a like sort of flat end game.
Yeah. So there was people where it would like who won, like we would keep track because we're just trying to get the edge on the other.
Right.
And those people really push you to grow, because you're like, if I just get a little bit stronger, I can beat this guy, or a little bit better, or nail this technique, I can beat this guy. But but those other people, like maybe they get a little bit of like leeway and like pushing me around a little bit, but not too much, because I like we both know that it won't be easy. Like you can dominate me, but it won't be easy. And so there's some amount of respect that I have to give you in that area, but don't abuse it, or I'll just keep challenging you over and over again, and then you'll just spend all your time fighting. You don't want to do that. And then there's some people that are just way stronger than you. You're just like, okay, you win. And that's also important to acknowledge. And to see those people fight other people as well is good, because then you get to see, like, just because this person, like there were some people that were just incredibly strong for high scores, but there was a bunch of them, and so they would be also playing off each other as well. And that lets you realize like everybody's human, not everyone wins everything. It gives you like good perspective. I'm all for fighting. This is one of the things we're going to teach the kids, how to fight. Like the proper rules for fighting.
Okay.
Yeah. Damn, yeah.
I remain not fully convinced, but I think that is my own childhood upbringing coming into play with uncertainty as to whether it's really, really, really good, or there's another layer there as well. Genetically, I am more prone to, this is a cool thing, right? There's this thing that runs in my family of osteoporosis. And then because along with the osteoporosis gene, like your bones decay when you get about to 50 or whatever, your bones start to deteriorate and you don't have strong bones. And along with that is a not feeling if you break a bone. People.
Oh,
yeah. Yeah. Well, like, obviously I'm going to feel it a little bit, but it's not as bad as there are occasional videos of, my favorite video is the people who are arm wrestling and someone's arm breaks in the arm wrestle, and it's like hideously painful. And anyway, I look at those videos and I'm like, I don't think that hurts that much, but it's because I have the genetics and the experience of like bones don't hurt that much when they break, which is so. But along with that,
that's crazy. I didn't know this about you.
Yeah, well, it's just random genetics, right?
Yeah.
I still don't want to break my bones, but it's not like
I've had fractures, they hurt.
My dad has several times broken a bone and then weeks later been still complaining about it, and my mom's like, go get an x-ray, and he does, and it's broken. And my grandma fell over and went home, and 3 days later went to a hospital and had broken her hip. Now that's just kind of the genetics that I have.
That's crazy. Do you have like desensitive? Is it like pain, or or generally your body's numb, or what's it like? What's it like?
I think it's mainly, see, I'm not certain because I've never really done a drastic broken bone, but I think it's mainly around bones that my genetics is prepared to not have extreme pain with bone breaking because it happens.
So like the nerves just aren't innervating the bones or something as much?
Perhaps, or something like that, or I don't really know. I have no good external explanation, a very poor internal experience either, because I haven't broken
Do
enough.
you have good proprioceptive awareness?
Yeah.
Like, are you able to know where your body is in space? Well,
Yes. I've done a lot of meditating to get those skills.
was it something like, were you like coordinated as a kid, like good hand-eye coordination and sports kind of thing?
So I did something called occupational therapy, which is motor therapy, like fine motor skills was the thing. And so my handwriting is some scroll. I don't know if you can see that, but it's pretty scroll-like. You're not going to be able to read them too far from the camera. Anyway, my handwriting is still scroll, but it was picked up when I was in sort of kindergarten age that my fine motor control was not particularly good. And so I had a whole bunch of fine motor therapy is you sit with someone. There was
you put the pegs in the thing.
Pegs. Yeah, I was about to say the pegs.
Yeah,
right?
I've
you
done
get
it.
like a bucket, and you fill the bucket with pegs, and you pick up a peg and you put it on the edge of the bucket, and you just do that for the whole bucket, and then you one at a time you take them off, and it's meant to train fine motor control. I don't know if it actually does what it's meant to do, but that's what it's meant for.
This whole field is a little sketchy. Yeah.
It's a bit of like,
but it's also really important, and it does.
Right. So I had the fine motor therapy a bunch as I was growing up, and so I don't know what I would be without it, but here I am having had a whole bunch of fine motor therapy, which is like things like pegs and things like color in within the lines sort of thing, or like cut paper into a particularly neat shape, or
so for the audience, fine motor is when you're doing those small tasks like putting something in a peg,
something like sewing requires you to move the sewing needle in like very fine pieces.
Something very, very fine, versus gross motor is like the large motions.
Right.
So picking up boxes would be gross motor.
Right.
Threading a needle would be fine.
Yep. So I had a whole bunch of fine motor therapy in order to improve my fine motor skills, because allegedly I had very bad fine motor. I reckon I have this wild theory that if you had explained to me the problem like a little bit more clearly and told me like, oh, fine motor skill is important, and it's important because of these reasons, what we need you to do is sort of pay attention carefully while you do this task, so that you can have fine control, then chances are I might have just had it. But no one really fully explained to me. They were just like, now you do the peg thing. Or, I remember being like, and this is one of those difficult things, right? Where you can't get a kid to pay attention to what you want the kid to pay attention to. The kid's attention will go wherever. And if the thing is interesting, it'll go to the thing.
Yeah.
So chances are I was just a normal kid going through a disinterested phase with whatever they were trying to get me to do, and came up with poor fine motor.
Yeah, like for me, they told me like my mom's an occupational therapist, so she would bring the tests home and then practice on us, or to like set the norms or something. I don't know why, but but she's like, okay, like you're gonna get a score at the end. We want to see how good you are at this. And so as soon as you turn into a score, and now they've got like standardized testing, so they know what percentile you're going to be in for the situation, or at least whether it's normal or whatever. Like that's really interesting. Like that's cool because you've just gamified it.
Right. And so if you find the right way for the right kid, the kid who likes gamifying or likes having a score, you've just motivated them, incentivized them to pay attention and to focus really hard. Yeah,
but also I was good at those things, so I knew I was going to get a good score. I just didn't know how good the score. Right. For the things that are hard, it's harder to gamify, because if you suck at something, you don't want to do it. Like, this is just human.
There's also a progression for how to learn things, which I don't think was formal in the psychological literature back then, but it has now been formalized, of breaking things down into its parts and then combining it together, sort of thing, as a good process for learning something.
Yeah. They do. I think I guess they didn't do that for but they should have done that.
These days,
yeah, that's like a big thing that occupational therapists do, is breaking things down into the smaller tasks.
Yep.
But yeah, getting back to the explaining thing, that one is a thing that really sticks out with me. Because I do also remember, like, as a kid, like, as soon as I understood something, it was like, oh, this is the thing. So then I could just go and practice it.
Yeah, interesting. So I would call that sort of like a map territory alignment. So the adult knows what they want you to do. They want you to do some particular task, and they have the map and territory connected. What they don't have is your map connected to their territory. So they don't know how to get you to do the thing, right? The adult wants you to say please every time you want a glass of water, right? Yeah,
that's the thing, is like they'll do that, like, say please, because they're trying to connect. Instead, this is a thing that I've noticed that I try very hard not to do, is when you want something, it's like, this is like the NVC stuff, is share the need. Because adults will often, or at least like growing up, they want you to do a thing a certain way, and you don't know why you're doing it or why you're doing it that way. Instead of saying, like, hey, there's this need, there's this reason, this is the way the world is, this is the things you need to do, and this is like what it is. Then, like, for me, just because, like, also my brain doesn't work like normal people, which we could totally do an episode on that at some point, but I need to figure out, like, my own way to do it. But like, if you tell me what is the actual problem that we're trying to solve, it's a lot easier for me to try to figure it out. And then often I just figure out the same solution everybody else does. But then I get it.
This could be tying your shoes or remembering to pack something. Or...
Yeah, like the tying the shoes is like, yeah, they could do this over the body and through the thing. And then, but if it's more like, hey, look, your laces are sticking out, they're gonna get
caught in things.
Yeah. Huh? Yeah, like that's like, I don't believe you, and then I trip over them. Okay, I guess there's something to this. And now I can just tie my laces however I want, right? Because, like, what doesn't matter how to tie laces as long as it works. And actually, for a long time, the normal laces didn't work because they just kept getting undone. So I'd have to double knot them. And there's like a bunch of cool double knots you can do.
I will raise my hand as a cool double knotter as well.
Oh yeah.
Well, nowadays I don't really wear shoes, but back when I wore shoes, yes.
Back when COVID wasn't a thing for future people.
No, I haven't worn shoes.
We're not allowed out of our houses.
It's probably more than 10 years. So after high school, I sort of stopped wearing shoes.
Oh, so did you go like barefoot outside and stuff?
Yeah, all the time. I also live in Australia. I live in a beachside city, so it's a bit more normalized to do.
Oh, that's awesome.
I'm like,
yeah, I love wearing shoes.
Yeah, so, but you're in Canada. It's currently snowing there. Like, there's a time and a place.
Boots weather, yeah. Just snowed again like crazy. Everything is blizzard.
Right. So it's a little bit. This is what I would call natural consequences, where if you want to be barefoot and go out in the snow, you will learn that your feet get very cold and you don't enjoy it, probably.
Yeah, but you learn that, like, why do you wear shoes? And then because like I didn't like wearing shoes as a kid, and then they make me, but now I know, like, okay, there's certain, like, I don't like walking on rocks because it's very unpleasant. And so I'm planning ahead if I have to bring shoes or if I have to wear them or not. But I'm making the informed choices, and I'm usually correct-ish.
Yep.
Correct enough.
Right. So,
and that's all you really need in life.
So I have this question here. If you're trying to teach a kid something, and like the please thing, when you're asking for what I say please first. And we want to do this in a way that is less coercive and less annoying, and less annoying than the way that was sometimes done to us, where the adults were like, what's the magical thingamajig?
Yeah, what's the magic word? Like, I fucking hate that game.
What's the magic word? Is the magic word gimme? Give me the water?
Yeah, like if you're playing it with, there is an age where that is appropriate.
Right. And then there's an age where it's not.
Yeah. And yeah. All that stuff. Like just like but I mean, like I guess it's not fair. Like we were saying now, like we're growing up. Like I grew up without violence. More
right. So the question is, how are you going to teach the kid these things without the like magic word thing?
So this is the stuff that we're doing, right? Like this is the
what's the fundamental
when
paradigm?
you say this, it makes me feel this way, and I'm really hoping like I would prefer that you would say please and thank you. I feel like it would build our relationship or whatever, right?
But you do a general like, let me explain this to them.
Yeah. But
So
that itself is almost a punishment, right? You have to listen through an explanation. It's annoying. You're gonna try to avoid that.
there's yeah. Well, that's the there's a cost here. There's a sneaky cost of the way in which you solve this problem will be thrown back at you when the kid wants to solve a problem later. So you better enjoy receiving whichever method you're using.
Yeah.
Because if it's yelling,
I love it when people explain shit to me. It's my favorite.
right. So
I have had this.
Daniel's love language is explanations.
Yeah, because then I gotta know what's going on.
Right.
I love knowing what's going on because I lose, like I get into this state when people like explain or paint the world a certain way. Like I just get like sucked into that and like understanding what's going on. It's very euphoric for me. It does happen to me. Like my wife does this where she's using my tricks against me, but then I just really enjoy them. And then she gets the thing she wants, and then there's just this vacuum of I didn't think
that
this was gonna go down like this.
Yeah.
That has to be dealt with, but yeah, it's fun. Yeah, but you're right. Like you want to be using the tactics that they can use on you, because then you have
they will use on you, and that you will enjoy when they do.
Yeah, and then that's a relationship, right? Where they're updating based off of your stuff, and then they're using that for you, and then you get to. And if you do it right, you get the things you enjoy. It's very like there's a certain level of narcissism there. I think all parenting is a little bit narcissistic, but I think it's okay. Like, you know, you're teaching them, you're creating them in your own image of the things that you like or the things you value. You're giving them your values, and then they value those things, and then you get to live with someone that values
propagates your values. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you have a good value system, then it usually winds up being, I think, a growth experience, because they're never going to do it the way you do it.
Yes.
But if they're good values, then that person is expanding your world.
Right. So if you value success and your next generation values success, they may see a different thing to be successful at, but the success will still propagate as a good value to be having.
Yeah. And then like what are you willing to pay for success as well, right? If it's cutthroat, fuck everyone, like you're going to be on the receiving end of that. But if it's be nice to people and help them get to understand them, compassion, learn, curiosity, then you're gonna get that back at you. And I'm very much looking forward to that. I say as a naive parent of a 4-month-old who has not had to deal with teenagers yet.
You tell him when you're putting him to bed tonight, I'm looking forward to you in 10 years' time being successful in the ways that I care about, because these are my values. And you see how he babbles back at you. You'll see.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even now there's battles going on, right? Like I'm like, you need to sleep, and he's like, I don't want to sleep. Like, he doesn't say that, but But that's the thing going on. And so like even that already is the battle of how are we doing this? And I think like you're saying, like with the talking and stuff, we're talking it out. And talking is not always about the words you say, it's about being with the person and empathizing, which is a lot of that. And so that's the way we're fighting these battles is, well, at least on my end, is trying to meet his needs. I guess on his end, it's, I don't know that he's really has concepts yet, right?
He's probably like, he seems still surprised about the world. So he's still probably doing a lot of just processing, being surprised about everything.
Yeah.
And he's done that until he's ready to do the next thing.
Yeah. He is constantly like wonder, fascination, excitement. Like he's very much, and I love that stuff. So it's working out really well so far. Yeah, he gets excited or like fascinated by everything.
Yeah, there's this idea in sort of meditative philosophy, I guess, of childlike, a return to childlike states of experience. So
where it's like pure and all-encompassing.
Right. Or like novel and fresh in some way.
Yeah. Like in ways that are there's novel and fresh, and then there's ways that are just beyond you. It's like it's almost it's like awe. It's awe. I think he feels a lot of awe.
Do you think that we then forget the awe?
Yeah. Like when was the last time you were in awe? Like how often do you do that?
Not all that often, but I also don't remember as a kid being in awe all the time. So
being in a war?
But I don't remember feeling like I was in awe all the time when I was a little kid. Maybe I did, but I seem to have forgotten. Do you remember?
There was, yeah, I do feel much more cynical now, like less. I'm less open to it because I think it's probably someone trying to trick me rather than something worth awing over.
This is I have a theory that one thing we gain when we become adults is complexity of experience. We can have many things going on, and one thing we lose when we get complexity is purity of experience.
Yeah,
like pure happiness, pure joy,
pure sadness.
Pure sadness, right? We don't really have those anymore because we have so much that we're tracking and that we're trying to solve existence for 27 values, as opposed to I am happy right now in that childlike wonder way.
Yeah.
And I see that I see some of meditations has a purpose of attempting to re-achieve the childlike purity of experience.
Yeah.
Because it's still here. It's just life is a bit more complicated.
Yeah, I think there's like yes, and then to build on that, I think there is value in those pure experiences. I'm not saying that you should be going through life just feeling pure experiences, because you're just going to get taken advantage of. But you do need sometimes to be in those pure experiences to. I don't want to use the word reclaim them, but it's like how you're talking about, like with the jhanas all the time, where when you're in a pure experience, it becomes a peak experience. It becomes satisfied and like saturated. And then that it's a more comfortable place to go to. Because you stop. I think a lot of us avoid certain feelings or certain emotions, certain triggers, because we haven't like processed that or whatever. And when you're able to experience getting lost in things, that you're okay getting lost in things, and that unsticks you. But also you don't necessarily crave, on the other side of that, you don't necessarily like crave getting lost in things because you have it or you've had it. Like there is some level of satisfaction.
So the way the technical description I have is the phrase experiential knowing. So the proposal is that by spending something like 3 hours in each of the jhanas. So the jhanas are a meditative concentration state. There is something gained in terms of an experiential knowing that anytime any part of my submind wants to access excitement, it's available. Anytime any part of my submind wants to be happy, it can just be happy. It's not like I have to climb a mountain to feel accomplished. I can just give myself the feeling of like, oh, that's good. I like these things. I don't have to desperately crave it from the outside world, which will never quite be fulfilling because the trick is in my own head that I've put it out there anyway. And so in that experiential knowing process, I will resolve some sort of craving that I have. And then as I go out into the world, maybe my goals won't be as motivated and as annoying in those ways, but also I can be much happier in general because I'm not constantly in this craving cycle of wanting more. And the crazy thing is we do the like more, and then we do the too much. Like we're just like, if you ever spend a bunch of time doing some mindfulness, you will go through this phase of, oh my God, it's just one damn thing after another. Brains are just, oh my God, they just never stop. First they're happy, and then they're thirsty, and then they're tired, and then they're grumpy, and then they're confused, and they just never let up. It's incredible.
Yeah. That's what is that? That's the karmic cycle, right?
There are many karmic cycles, but yes, the never letting up is the
never letting up is the karmic cycle.
Yeah, in theory, you can get more completed around the cycle, and then you feel a lot more free.
Well, there's a bunch of stuff you can do, but I think the reason why I said that is I like a lot of people like doing the spiritual. They talk about the spiritual stuff and then try to explain it, and like I'm down for that. But there's also the other side of when it comes up naturally or when there's a phenomenon that exists, to be able to name it, like, okay, that thing that we just talked about, like Daniel thinks that's called the karmic cycle. And or yeah, where it's just things just keep coming up and it's one damn thing after another, right? Whether that's in a lifetime or in a day or over centuries or millennium or a species or whatever, right? Like it's the same. There's this path. It's still there's certain things that are in common with these patterns.
It's almost incredible that we get anything done, given how much we are so unstable and so unable to stay on one topic. Just one damn thing after another.
Yeah.
We built this. We as a society built civilization. That's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing also, given how
concentration is real.
Concentration is real.
Yeah. And there yeah, for sure, concentration is real. Yeah. You disagree with that?
Well, I sometimes it feels like there's no such that thing as concentration, and sometimes it's like, oh yeah, I can stay on the breath for an extended period of time and nothing else comes in. You know, I really have the skill of doing that. Sometimes and sometimes.
Yeah, that's concentration. You're concentrating on objects. Well, in this case, it would be like a meditation object, which is your breath, for a long period of time so that you can practice concentration. Yeah, this is the thing that I've done as well. It's amazing. If you concentrate on something and then notice your concentration and enjoy concentrating, it's an amazing experience.
Right.
It feels so good. I think that's samadhi, right?
Yes. Yeah. I would sort of. So I would describe what you're doing is you take an external object, like
it doesn't have to be external. The best ones are the internal ones.
Right.
But you start with the external. Yeah.
Start with an external object like a black dot on a white piece of paper. Nice classic simple object. You can use a pebble, a stone, a candle.
Naruto, they do this. Yeah, the leaf symbol in Naruto. Yeah. You can pull it up. It's a dot, and then it's the circle around it, like the space around it, and then there's a little piece off the edge. And like they use this as like Naruto's main weapon is the wrestling. I don't know if we should get into this now, but whatever. Okay.
Right. So, but you start with the external object. You put your attention on the external object, and then you shift. There's an instruction to shift from external object to visual field. So now instead of just on the object over there, I'm on my visual field pointed at the object.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then
you're moving backwards from the external world into the internal.
Into the internal, into the, like you said, the awareness of concentration on the object. And so now I keep my eyes on the object, but I'm leveraging, I like control the lever all the way back here at the concentration and the awareness. And now my object is no longer the thing in the external world, it's something in the internal world. So the concept of the experience of concentration in the internal world. And so, and then that's really enjoyable, especially if you reward yourself for concentrating so well. You're like, yeah, I'm doing great at this.
Well, if you do it right, that is the reward. It feels like you start to get high.
Right.
Right. And this is like one of like my main motivations of why I was able to sort of do a lot of the meditations is because I was using it to craft highness. Because you can create the exact high that you want. And so whether, like it started off, I was like smoking pot and doing this. And then I just stopped smoking pot because I could just do this without the drugs. And so I was just like getting high all the time on the drugs, on the meditation. And then, it's crazy. Like I had all crazy experiences with that where I was crafting my own high. And then I would notice if I go up too much, then I would be like dead the next day. So I have to like balance, because too much euphoria. Euphoria is great, but then it costs a lot.
Costs energy, right?
Yeah, you lose it and you're just like dead for a while. So there's a certain level of euphoria, like if you combine the euphoria with the grounding, that's what it is. The grounding also feels good, but it doesn't, at least for me, I didn't know that it felt good at the beginning. So that's like kind of like jhana 1 is like that, where when I was first experiencing that, I'm like, you guys call this, what was it called? Joy? They call it joy, I think.
Bliss.
Like they call it bliss. I'm like, this is not like this is torture. Like it didn't feel good.
Yeah, so I've seen this a couple times that I think if you can accidentally have already maxed out your bliss, and then when you encounter new bliss, you only experience it as basically irritation. Like it's novel. It's like the light is.
It wasn't like that for me. It was the exact opposite, where it was where I didn't have any of it, and because every time I started to feel it, I didn't like it. And that goes back to like childhood trauma stuff. Where I didn't trust the feeling.
Right.
And so it took a while to like let go enough that I could trust the feeling, that I could actually sit and enjoy it.
Right. Because being excited about something is very close to being deluded about something, or being taken advantage of, or being gullible. Yeah, like 100%. Like the the reality distortion fields. Do you know what I mean by that? So people create those, and that's how they get you. Like that's the weakness, right? When you do first jhana, you get excited, and then they take that and they spin it into their thing, and you've lost like any semblance of autonomy because you're blissed out. What they've done is they've taken your connection to spirit, and they have said that they caused it, and that the way to get over it is to follow my path over here. And so they sort of conned you into co-opting their vision, because they know how to manipulate bliss. The way that you are attracted to. Where I would say that genuine spirituality is personally accessible by everyone, and you don't need, other people can be a helpful guide, but will not actually be in control of your spiritual connection. Cannot be. If they are, you're doing it wrong. Because your spiritual connection is your connection with the divine. Right. Now, there is something to be said for guru type culture, where the guru quite literally stands in the place of the divine, for the purpose of the relationship and that spiritual experience. And there, I think we are rapidly running out of patience for it in our current political, cultural climate. But historically, that was a really powerful thing and potentially useful.
Yeah, I do empathize a lot with the guru situation, because sometimes you just need someone like just like, let me just walk you through all the stuff for now, and then you'll get it, and you'll be able to.
There's a very big difference between and then you'll get it, and I will always have godlike status over all of the things that you can experience. I will be the
that's you're teaching the wrong lessons at that point.
Right.
It's like riding a bike. I think like there is something like that where, you know, when you're first riding a bike, like your dad is holding the bike for you, so you don't fall. It's like, if I'm not here, you're going to hurt yourself, right? But then you're doing it, and then the dad is like not there anymore, but you don't notice it. And then you notice it and you panic. You're like, don't panic, you've already been doing it. It's fine. Right? Like, oh, I can't do it. Like, no. Like, that was like 10 minutes ago. You couldn't do it. And so to me, that's where it is. And then once you step there, then it's like, okay, we both are now bikers. But also recognize I've been doing this a lot longer, so I'm better at it than you are. But you're autonomous in that way. Right.
But I'm better at me riding the bike. You're better at you riding the bike. I'm not better. In the beginning, I was
riding the bike. Yeah. It's the goalposts have changed, right? So it's from the beginning. It was you need me to ride the bike. Now it's you need me to go on these long trips with you, because you don't know how to ride a bike and pay attention to your surroundings and right. So you've shifted the goalpost, but now they have that ability.
Spirituality. Fights.
I think we're past
explaining
things. But yeah, I mean, you could bring in fights here, but
no, I'm just taking a couple steps back through what we've covered. Explaining things to kids, interfacing with society. What are the skills of tomorrow? Yeah.
These are like the skills of tomorrow. Yeah. So the gurus thing, I think, is switching. Like, that system doesn't make sense anymore, especially with the globalization and the inter all that stuff. Like, you can't, like, it back in the day, if you're stuck in like a village, right, and there's like one guy that knows this stuff, he gets to do whatever he wants, right? Now there's competition.
Well, so society is a lot more complicated.
Yeah, it was the jhanas. Yeah, I want to show off, because I knew this stuff was working, because there were things back in the day, like there were things that used to grab me and suck me in, and now when those things happen, I see it happen, and it does like bend, it does reality distort a little bit, but not really. And it's not like I'm fighting it. Back in the day, I used to have to I wouldn't get in the frame. Like, that was the thing. I would notice the frame before it happened and then stay out of it. Now I'm just me, and the frame washes over me. My reality gets like wobbly a little bit. And then I notice it's wobbly, and I just sit with it for a while. And then like the truth just hits me again. Like, I kind of just go through that like gravitational field.
And the way you describe this reminds me of, I went to an introduction to Landmark. I don't know if you're familiar. Landmark is a personal development the Landmark Forum. They're global. They're a very profitable business, and they seem to be able to do good things for some people. And I went to an intro night, and their intro night is a sales pitch, basically. It consists of there was maybe 10 people. There's a room full of about 50 people. There was maybe 10 people that stood up and said, this is where I was before Landmark. Then I went to Landmark, and then I felt way better. And, this was with a bit more personal story in it. And that room, the main speaker pumped it full of bliss, like the whole time. And I was so uncomfortable there my knees started aching. Like, I don't even know.
Were you fighting the bliss, or were you like enjoying it?
I was like, oh, this is just bliss. Like, having been far enough down my meditative journey, I was like, this is just bliss. You know, at some point in the evening, they're like, and what would you like to get out of that, Mark? And they break the whole room into personal conversations. Like, talk to the person next to you. And the whole room had this like excited buzz of what may be possible or potential. Because if you pump a room full of bliss, that's sort of where people's minds go. Their psyches lean in towards this, like, oh, I could use this blissful energy towards these guys. And so most people were potentially quite excited about the ideas that they had talked about and where they were going. But for me, I was like, oh my God, I'm so sick of bliss. I've had enough. Like, there's a lot of bliss right here.
Interesting. Yeah, because
So,
it does get overbearing at a certain point.
Yeah, at some point you really want to just go from bliss to joy to contentment, equanimity, right?
That's why I love the cycle. Like the jhana cycle is, it takes you through it, and at the end you're at equanimity.
Yeah.
Which is where you should end. I mean, really, it's really the cycles you start wherever you are and whatever, but like you get to equanimity, like, and then that's peace. It's resolved.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can move on to, well, what does that mean, resolved, right? And then those are the next four. But yeah, like that's a thing. That bliss thing is it's manipulative, but also really necessary and important.
I think there are ways to do it. I would prefer my psychotechnologies overt and explicit. So I will occasionally go to do a move with someone like, what about this question, right? But what I'll do is I'll be like, oh, I better explain what I'm about to do before I do it. You know, I will say, there's this method calls this.
Yeah,
I use a question like this.
Okay.
And it's less magical, but it's more personally safe, I think.
Yeah, so I definitely agree with you. And I think that's really important. And also, like, a lot of people just can't get into the headspace if you're explaining things.
Right. So I keep it to a minimum, like a sentence or less, and then go straight to the method. But I don't need to be the magic man with the magic method. I'm just the guy who's using a method that does exist. But I don't need that. I don't need the credit to be on me. The credit can be on either the method or hopefully the results of the method, right? Because if a person digs into their own psyche and finds something of value, I don't want to be here being like, I helped you find the thing of value. Nor do I want to be like, this method helped you find the thing of value. I want to be like,
you do want some credit, like you were there, and it is important to recognize.
Sure, I was there, but you found the thing of value. It's yours. You get to keep it. You get to have it, keep it, and enjoy it forever.
Yeah.
It's not about me or my magical method that I learned from some school or something. It's about you and what you get out of your own spirituality.
Yeah, and that's the path. That's the true path. And
hopefully you'll look fondly upon me for being helpful along the way. But
right, that's the thing.
You
build in the love as you do it. If you do it from a place of love, then that's, I think, a lot of the feeling that they get from you. Like, oh, I love this, or like I feel a lot of love towards this person.
Right. There was no hidden terms and conditions to this. They just helped me find my own thing, and that was
right. Right, and this is the true way of being. And also, marketing is important, and like if you're gonna, this is the reason why I want to talk about this is. I know it is crass because we're having this like spiritual discussion, and it's crass to involve economics, but
yeah, it's
a this, I really think the future of psychotechnology depends on is going to reflect, like the psychotechnology, religions, I call it whatever, or all these things, they reflect the economic realities.
Absolutely. It's also like some of the things that psychotechnologies can help with is like abundance. So if you feel like you don't have enough money, then you're going to feel some sense of suffering, whether or not you do or don't have. And so psychotechnologies can help you to resolve that desire for more money by making you feel like there is more abundance. Now you can still struggle,
Yeah, this is
and
true.
from that place you can work hard. But if you didn't feel the abundance in the first place, then you're going to be really upset, no matter what you do. And so psychotechnology can help with the economics in various ways.
Yeah, I don't think that's what I was exactly getting at. What you're saying is that the psychotechnologies can help people with how people relate to the economic situation in more productive, positive ways.
Right.
And yeah, like that's true, and that's obviously true. I think. Well, it's obviously true to me, but also because I've like used that to change my mindset, and I've helped others, and I've seen other people do that. But I was talking about the practitioners. Because like I envision a world where psychotechnologists are like doing things and let's say as common as like psychologists or something. Where it's this is the thing people do, and
like a profession or a domain of
expertise. I didn't necessarily. I don't know if it's like that's the thing is I don't know what form it's going to take.
Right.
And I think the form it takes is like from that economic side is very important. Like, is this a thing where like everybody knows this a little bit? Is this a thing where you have some people who are like full time and they just go around doing this stuff? Is this just a thing you put on your resume? Hey, I know these psychotechnologies, and then you sometimes do those. I don't know. And this is a very important problem that needs to be solved. And I would like to also be part of the solution. Yeah, because we're living in the era of psychotechnology, so it's important that we try to deal with this and solve this problem.
And I believe that's linked to episode 405, the year of psychotechnologies.
Yeah, I feel like that was a transition point in the YouTube in what we're doing, where we were kind of just like hanging out, doing psychotechnologies, whatever, talking about it. We're combining. I thought of this line. We're combining I stole it from somewhere else, but we're combining our two favorite things: psychotechnology and talking about psychotechnology.
Oh my gosh. All right, point taken. Maybe that's a good place to round up.
Sure.
Yeah. Psychotechnologies live. Woo!